Salam sejahtera dan selamat malam saya ucapkan pada rakan-rakan senegara dan hadirin yang saya hormati. Singapura, Kudimakale, Perole, Nanberle, Ungal Elarkam Panikam. 各位同胞、朋友们，大家晚上好。Fellow citizens and friends, first, let me salute Mr. Lim Swee Say for what he's been doing, not just here in East Coast, but for Singapore. Swee Say spoke about change. He spoke about how our society is changing, how our government is changing, and how we must all change. And before I go on, I want to tell you from my experience in the last 14 years in politics, together with Swee, both in his roles in NTUC, as Secretary General and as a minister, that he has been at the vanguard, at the front line of change for a better society. And it has been my privilege to work closely with Swee in my various capacities as Education Minister, Finance Minister, and in helping to coordinate our social policies. It has been my privilege to learn from him, to discuss things with him, to argue with him, and to finally agree on things with him, together with PM and our cabinet colleagues. Thank you, Swee. We are changing in fundamental ways. First, we are rebalancing between economic and social policies. No matter how successful our economy is, a successful economy by itself will not give us an inclusive and fair society. Economic policy has to go together with active social policies to help those who start with less, to help our mid-career Singaporeans, including our PMEs, and to help older Singaporeans to age with grace and dignity. And it is this combination of economic and social policies that we are forging in Singapore today. We're not starting now. We started 10 years ago. Step by step, we are building a more fair and a more equitable society. That's the first major shift, and I will talk a little more about this later. This rebalancing between the economic and the social. A second important shift is in the way we develop ourselves as Singaporeans, how we look at each new generation and how we develop ourselves through life. We can no longer develop Singaporeans and no longer advance as a society by merely focusing on schools, on how well we do when we are young. Many years ago, we used to think that how well you do in life depends on what you're born with and how hard you work in school, and the grades you got in school. O levels, N levels, sometimes you progress to A levels, poly. A few people went to university. The grades you got when you were young shaped a lot of what happened in life. Our views have changed, our beliefs have changed, and the situation has changed. We now need to develop every Singaporean throughout life, starting much earlier than the school years, much earlier, before they get to school. but also well after the school years, continuously. No society has done this well, but we must do this. We must do this for our future. We don't have many Singaporeans. Every Singaporean counts. Discovering everyone's potential, everyone's strength, and developing it through life. Discovering new strengths as you go through life, when you get second chances and third chances. This too is a very important shift, so that our society and our meritocracy is not based on what happens during your school years, but how you perform in life, how you discover yourself in life, how you work as a team through life. This too is a very important shift. And we have a journey ahead of us in achieving this shift. A third shift, which is very important, is how government has changed. It used to be a top-down government, often quite heavy-handed. You know what I mean. It is no longer that way, because we have changed, Singapore has changed, and we have changed so that we can continue to lead Singapore for a better future. Strong leadership today is different from strong leadership 20 or 30 years ago. Strong leadership means listening, actively engaging, changing your mind when the situation changes or when you get better ideas from others, continually adapting, but leading all along the way. Strong leadership is listening, engaging, moving with people, but also moving people with you to a better future. It is a very different style of leadership. So we say, each week, how often are you on the ground? How many times a week? Do you have any days off? Suisse is exceptional. I know, because he often chabots from cabinet meeting early because he has to be in East Coast. I spend 4 or 5 days a week with residents of one form, one type or another, one problem or another, different groups, and it's a tremendous learning experience. Tremendous learning experience. We have changed. This is the way forward. A rebalancing of economy and society, maximizing everyone's potential through life, not determining your life's chances when you're young. Making sure that in Singapore, birth is never destiny. What happens in life doesn't depend on who you were born to. Because that is a true meritocracy. A true meritocracy is when birth is not destiny. The birth is just the start of a journey through life where you keep developing. And finally, moving from top-down government to a government that listens, engages, and leads. These are the shifts that we have begun, starting a decade ago especially, picking up pace, and we need your support to continue in this direction for everyone's good. We have a lot more to do. We have a lot more to do. We face the same challenges that most of the developed societies face. Some things are special to Singapore, but most of our challenges are the same as what most developed societies face. How to keep social mobility going how to reduce inequalities whilst ensuring that everyone puts in their fair share and puts in full effort. How to ensure that people in the middle of their careers are treated fairly, are given a full chance to advance. How to make sure that the elderly in a society that is getting much older are treated with dignity and have fulfilling lives. All societies face these same challenges, but we start from a position of strength because we are a united society, we have the resources, we don't have the crippling economic problems many countries have, and we have a government that is listening to the people, adjusting policies, and finding the best way forward. But these are important challenges, and we are not done. We are not done on any of them. Social mobility has to be the start. That has to be part of our identity as Singaporeans, that no matter who you're born to, what type of HDB home you have, who your parents are, what education they had, what jobs they do, no matter who you're born to, what type of background you have, you can advance in life, you can discover something in yourself, you can do well, and you can contribute to Singapore. But we have to do more to achieve this in future. Meritocracy alone will not produce social mobility. It's a fair system, but it is not enough. We have to intervene early in life, find every way of helping kids when they are young, even before they go to kindergarten and childcare. Find every way. Help the parents, help the children, through government action, but through community action as well. Experiment, find the best ways, but do it with energy and passion. We're doing a lot more in our schools and our preschools. First, preschool is much more affordable now. Our low-income group pays $3 to $5 a month for full-day childcare. But it's not just the affordability. Quality is critical. We have vastly improved the quality of the preschool sector, but we are not fully done yet. There's a lot more to do. A lot more to do to make sure that the kids who come from low-income backgrounds, and especially their parents haven't had a good education, that the kids have equal chance. Because in the preschool they go to, they've got good teachers, nurturing teachers, empathetic teachers. There's more to be achieved. And then when they go into primary school, our learning support programs, our specialists, we now have a lot more specialists in our primary schools, which is why we're spending a lot more on our weaker pupils. Specialists in different learning difficulties, specialists in early primary school education. In fact, we just started recently a new program in NIE, Advanced Diploma for the Early Primary Years, Specialist Diploma, because teaching kids in the early primary years is very different from teaching them in primary 5 and primary 6, let alone secondary school. So many experiments, many efforts, but we've got to raise the quality of our bringing for every child, including especially those who start with less. Then what happens when people enter the workforce? We have to do more to help the poor, do more to reduce inequalities, not just by saying things that sound right politically, but doing things that can work on a sustainable basis and really improve people's lives. We are quite unusual because our lower income households have seen a significant improvement in incomes in the last 5 years. Unusual amongst the countries that are in the same league as us. Hong Kong, Taiwan, of course Europe, Japan, the US, where there's been a decline in living standards. We've seen a significant improvement in the last 5 years. But there is a group at the very bottom, within the bottom 5%. In fact, we have 50,000 Singaporeans working full-time with less than $1,000 a month. It's about 3% of our resident workforce. Doesn't sound like a high percentage, but 50,000 is a big number. And we all know them. In all our constituencies, we meet them, we know them. We've got to do more to help them. How are we doing it? Swisay's progressive wage model, starting with cleaners, security guards, moving on to landscape workers, those who do the gardening and tend to our parks. That's one very important way. It's working well. And starting from 1st September this year, the cleaners, all cleaners, will have to be paid a minimum of $1,050, but with a progressive ladder on top of it. That's one way. But there's also, besides the progressive wage model, which is targeted at those sectors where there's cheap sourcing, don't forget workfare, which is a major innovation and which is the real alternative to the minimum wage in Singapore. Workfare is adding significantly to wages. For someone with $1,000 a month, most of them, if they're working full-time, are getting $150 to $250 extra every month through workfare. Those who are older get $250 to $300. They're paid quarterly, but that's what it amounts to every month. Very significant increase, workfare. Workfare, progressive wage model, skills upgrading, and making sure that there are jobs always available for Singaporeans. That's how we uplift everyone. And if we fail after some years, if we find that things are getting stuck, then we have to consider every alternative, whether it's a minimum wage or any other solution. But it is succeeding. Our approaches are succeeding, and very importantly, they're succeeding without losing jobs for older, low-skilled workers, because they are the ones who will be most vulnerable. If we go for a simple minimum wage strategy, they're the ones who are the most vulnerable. Our older, low-skilled workers who did not have the advantages of subsequent generations. They had little education, they were stuck in simple, low-paid jobs for most of their careers. They're the most vulnerable. By using workfare, where the government pays them on top of what the employer pays, by using the progressive wage model, worked out on a tripartite basis, we've made sure they don't lose their jobs. How much does it amount to? When you add up the different things we do, a very significant government intervention. I spoke at a recent rally about how for every $1 of tax that the low-income group pays, those who are in the bottom 10%, every $1 of tax they pay, they get $6 back in subsidies. What I didn't say then is how different it is today compared to just 10 years ago. That's $6 back for every $1 of tax they pay. $6 back through subsidized childcare, healthcare, workfare, all the subsidies. That $6 back is almost double what it was 10 years ago. Major shift. Major shift. Then what do we do about savings and retirement? Very important. It's not just when people are growing up and their working years, but how do we ensure that those who are poorer have a good retirement? We've increased our healthcare subsidies, and I'm not just talking about the pioneer generation, which is a special generation. On a permanent basis, we've increased our healthcare subsidies. But a critical improvement was what we have done to add to the savings of lower income Singaporeans through the CPF system. First, 2008, we increased CPF interest rates, extra interest. So today, more than half of CPF members get 3.5% on the ordinary account, 5% on the special account. But that's not all. That's not all. We also give a housing grant, and we also add part of your workfare into your savings, which earns the same interest. And when you add in all the subsidies we give through the CPF, the low-income worker today, based on our latest policies, will earn 6.5% on his ordinary account throughout his working life. 6.5%. Major subsidy. And after retirement, after 65, 6% interest rate. All this without them having to take any investment risk by investing on their own. It's guaranteed. They are assured that not only their money is safe, but the interest will be paid, because this is a AAA government. The CPF system is not perfect. It is not perfect, and we're always looking to improve it. But it avoids two big problems. First, the problems of social security systems in many other countries, especially the advanced countries, which are simply unsustainable. Unsustainable sounds like it's a financial concept. It's not just a financial concept. It is about the big burden that's going to be placed on the next generation. An inequitable burden. Because ordinary working people are going to have to pay more in future for social security, but get less benefits than today. It's as simple as that. They're going to have to pay much more in future, but get less benefits than today. Totally inequitable. We don't have that problem. Second, it is also fair. Because the systems in the rest of the world that are sustainable are systems where each person has to invest on their own. They choose their investments, and unfortunately, in the United States, in Europe and Britain, everywhere where they've tried it, ordinary people are unable to make decent investment returns. They go in at the wrong time, they come out at the wrong time, they lose money, they pay high fees. It's been a real tragedy. I've been studying this for some years. It's a real tragedy to have forced them to take risk in order to earn returns. They end up not earning good returns, but they pay high fees. What we will do, we are using the government budget to add to the savings of ordinary people. Those who are better off, we have to improve the system to help them to take some risk in the CPF system more easily, more conveniently, at low cost. There's a CPF-IS system, but it's a bit unwieldy. There are too many choices. The CPF panel is now studying how we can simplify it and give them easy options to take somewhat more risk, invest long-term in the hope of getting better returns. That way, we have a fair system, but also a sustainable system. So it's not a perfect system. We have to keep improving it, but it's avoided the big tragedies that we see internationally in social security systems. So that's about savings. Starting from young, through working life, and into the retirement years. We've got to take care of our poor, help them to uplift themselves, and make sure that everyone feels they're progressing with each other as Singaporeans. The middle-age PMEs are what Swissay has been very concerned about. And we are all concerned about in government. Swissay has been talking about the fair consideration framework, talking about how we are going to get very serious about local concentrations of foreigners. Some industries having a real concentration of foreigners, some companies having a real concentration, and some departments within the same company having a concentration. Swissay, as Manpower Minister, is looking very closely at this. But it's not just an issue of level playing field in Singapore. Our bigger challenge is how to avoid what is already happening in the United States and elsewhere. The economists call it polarization. The top is moving up. The bottom is able to get jobs, although low pay, but the middle is gradually disappearing in their workforce because technology is taking over. The digital revolution is taking over. Automation is taking over. This is a real challenge all over the world, in the most advanced countries, but increasingly all of us. And we will do everything we can to avoid this, to make sure that middle-income Singaporeans have good careers throughout their lives, that they don't get treated by employers midway through their careers as people who are dispensable, that they are invested in again by the employers, but with government providing very strong support. That's what Skills Future is about, continuous development through life. And we are going to put a lot of resources into this. Develop the skills of the future so that we can avoid this loss of jobs in the middle of our workforce. In every sector, advanced manufacturing, logistics and aerospace, finance, healthcare. Healthcare is going to change dramatically. Using technology, using data analytics, we can develop clinical procedures and decisions that nurses can make. We now have a new occupation called nursing clinicians. The clinicians are not just the doctors. Nurses can make clinical decisions because the technology and our experience and our techniques allow for it. Upgrade the job of nurses. Develop more specialists in geriatrics to take care of the old. Develop specialists in rehabilitation. A whole set of specializations in healthcare. We have to develop the skills, but also give Singaporeans good careers in these areas. So it's a very important area, quite apart from a level playing field in Singapore, fair treatment in the workforce. It's about investing in the future of each Singaporean so that no one peaks in their early 40s, the way it used to be. No one peaks in their early 40s. In your early 40s, you go on to another curve and you keep moving up. It may be in a different job or the same job, you deepen your specializations. That's what we have to do. And that's how we ensure that middle-income Singaporeans have a bright future. Finally, let me say, I didn't intend to talk about this under the East Coast skies, but I noticed that there have been several speeches in the last week about how there's this wonderful money available from reserves which can be used to expand our social spending. And I made a few quips about it earlier on, but looking at the recent speeches, I thought I better just address the points quite squarely. First, there is this idea that the government is actually making a very large surplus and hiding it away in reserves. And why don't we use this secret surplus and spend it instead on all the good things we want to spend on? Well, let me put it this way. First, there's this idea of a IMF statistic showing a much larger surplus. It's not IMF statistics, it's our statistics. We give it to the IMF and we publish it ourselves. Those statistics showing a surplus include the monies the government gets from selling land. Now, why do we do that? Why do we not spend in Singapore the monies that we get from selling land and instead put it into reserves where it can earn an income? This is simply prudent long-term budgeting. It doesn't mean we're hiding the money in reserves. It means that we will draw continually on the reserves every year by using the income on reserves. This way, you will never have a government that will go and sell land quickly, particularly when there's a property boom, in order to get money and spend more. We have written it into the Constitution. The government cannot spend money obtained from selling land. The money has to go into reserves because this was an asset you had. If you sell it, you keep it as an asset in your financial reserves. But this is not about saving money for great grandchildren. This is about money we are already benefiting from today. Because we have been prudent all along and have put the monies from selling land in reserves, today we have much higher investment income coming each year into our budget. This year, for instance, we have $9 billion of investment income. It's called Net Investment Returns Contribution, NIRC. $9 billion to be spent on social spending, infrastructure, anything. $9 billion. Of that $9 billion, $4 billion is attributable to the accumulated surpluses that went into our reserves due to the sale of land over the years. Had we spent it before, we would not now have this $9 billion. $4 billion comes from the reserves that were attributable to land sales. Very significant. So it's not just about benefiting our great-great-great-grandchildren. Today's generation, including today's older generation, is benefiting from this prudent budgeting. And it is a way in which we are fair to today's generation, but make sure that this same fairness extends to our children's generation and for all future generations. Stick to prudent budgeting. It is fair. Second idea that has come up is that the government makes some excess returns on top of what it pays the CPF. And this too is being stored away in reserves. It is not being stored away in reserves. Firstly, the government or the GIC, if it was simply managing CPF monies, it would not be investing long-term and taking significant risks in order to earn high returns. If you're managing only CPF monies, you have to be very careful because it's guaranteed. There's a guaranteed principal and interest. You'll have to invest in government bonds and maybe a bit of equities, but it'll be a very safe portfolio, not earning very much. Maybe just enough to pay the CPF. But in fact, the GIC is investing the surpluses from sale of land and many years of earlier government surpluses. And we are very lucky that when Singapore was young and growing rapidly, our leaders decided to run budget surpluses and not spend it immediately. We had 30 years, more than 30 years, of budget surpluses until year 2000, which together with the sale of land has given us significant reserves. That is why GIC can invest long-term, because it's managing government monies earned from past surpluses, not just CPF monies. If it was just CPF monies, it will not be earning very much. The investments will have to be very safe. But because it's managing significant government monies for the long term, GIC takes higher risks in order to earn higher returns. What happens to the returns? 50% of returns comes back into the budget for spending. This is the system. Today's generation benefits. The pioneers of today who were young before, they benefit, and tomorrow's generation benefits. Fair system. So let's not think that the government is squirreling away some savings in reserves and denying the people of benefits. We are already benefiting today from it, but we are doing it in a way that makes sure that future generations will get the same benefit. Finally, we are also changing our culture. In the old days, you had to depend on yourself. The government focused on basic education, gave people HDB homes, but there was very little social support. You had a social welfare department, Hock Li Po, only one when people had homeless or they were suffering from malnutrition. Self-reliance. Every speech by Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. Work hard, depend on yourself, raise your family well. That's the way to progress. Self-reliance. And the spirit of the pioneer generation, you know, the Hokkien song. Sa hun ti chu tia, chit hun ko pa pia. 3 parts depend on the heavens, 7 parts depends on bitter, hard struggle. That has to change. First, I don't think we can depend on the heavens, and the world around us is also a very unfriendly place. But we cannot just leave it to people to fend for themselves. You need an active government supporting people, helping them from young through to their retirement years. You need a strong community reinforcing what people are doing for themselves. And you need to keep that same ethic of responsibility. Responsible government, responsible community, responsible individuals and families. I haven't worked out the Hokkien version of it, but that is a future song. The basic values of the founding generation are still relevant, but we have to adapt them for a new time. And the new times require an active government supporting those who start with less and ensuring that we mitigate inequalities through life, an active community so that our society remains strong. And it's not just me and the government, a strong society wherever we live, volunteering in the senior activity centers, volunteering in every form of activity that makes people feel together on the ground, and individuals playing our role, discovering our strengths, working hard, taking pride in standing on our own feet. This is how we go forward together. This is how Singapore is changing, and this is how a changed PAP is going to lead you into the future. Thank you very much.